Day before yesterday, I was on Facebook Marketplace and I saw a brooch pin very similar to this, except theirs had a what I believe to be a synthetic ruby and a different type of modern locking mechanism on the pin. So the reason I would suspect, and this is a lesson as far as like if you're trying to find if something is authentic or you want to know what you have, these are things to look for between antique and modern jewelry. First thing, if you look at the stone here, or better yet, look at these stones. Now notice this has a modern locking mechanism on the pin with a hinge, and all of the machining is modern. It has marcasites. The other one didn't, which by the way, he was claiming it was Victorian, but I believe it was probably Art Deco. Now, interesting, marcasites did start in the Victorian era, and they did have these kinds of long brooches. In fact, this has some scrolling that would be more similar to that, but because Victoria loved marcasites, Queen Victoria did. Now, if we look at these rubies, you'll notice that these ones, they're actually in order of when they were cut. This is a transitional cut. It's a very rare, and how I obtained it, it probably has a very interesting history. It likely came from a very specific source. This is slightly less modern, and then these are modern. Now the facets on the modern stones, because they had better machinery and better polishing and better cutting techniques, are much more refined, especially the lab ones, because they don't have to work around the stone's imperfections to create the facets. Some of the most expensive stones in the world have a number of facets somewhere on the stone that are not to proportion. But when your crystal is perfect because it was made in a lab, you don't have those issues. Now if we were to look at brooches that are older, notice that this one does not have a locking mechanism, and it actually just fits under here, and you just pull it out from there. It's not like that at all. In fact, this is very crudely, and it's made, and it's actually, this one's older, so it's hard to get out, but it does. And this is gold, because old gold, and unless it's a very high carat gold, eventually will oxidize. But you can kind of see that it has a much cruder clasp, like this one. This is an old. These are pearls, and this is actually gold. It's unmarked. And you'll notice that there's like tiny minute details like that pin on the end where you just push down on it, and the actual wire will be the clasp. Now that was the much older type of clasp when it would use the spring inside the metal. This is another older clasp, but this one has a hinge, but it just fits under here like that. And it's an old silver pin that is completely turned black. Probably like from the 1890s. That one, the gold pin, a little older than that, and with the pearls, and the cameo style pin, probably about the same age, maybe slightly newer. But that scrolling would be much more common in the Victorian era, to have a lot of scrolling on it. And one of the things you'll also notice about the style pin, you probably could figure out this. A lot of watches, particularly Hamiltons and stuff from the Art Deco period, this would be the sides of the bracelet would have that kind of a design on it. So like you can see the different ones and modern ones that would probably be from somewhere between, which you'd be talking about with something like this, from the Edwardian period to the Art Deco period. This is a enamel, 80% silver rose, and it was probably, I believe it was made in France or something like that. This is gold, and you'll see same kind of thing. They would have these modern locking mechanisms, and the designs, some of them like this could be more ornate, but they were not. But they were nothing like what the Victorians did. This is a a really nice example that's fun to show is this was from Czechoslovakia. And this, I mean, this is all the different spectrums of Czech cut crystal glass. And this was from before World War II, probably from the 1920s or early 30s. And you can kind of see it's, you know, the same kind of thing. That's when you really started to see these locking clasps, and they would get thicker, the machining would get better, because machining was a big problem with the much earlier pieces. You know, and this one is not the most expensive brooch, but it's a very historically significant brooch because it's like a swatch for all the different Czech crystal colors. So anyway, from an early era. So that's kind of what I was getting at, and that's one of the big issues is a lot of jewelry gets mislabeled. He was started asking 75, then 50. I mean, if it's Art Deco, with a lab stone like that, it has a clean facets, which is how we can tell. It's probably, unless it's by a very respected maker, it's probably a $30 to $65 brooch, unless it was in solid gold or something. And but otherwise, you know, it could be worth more. It could be by that maker, and that's why sometimes older doesn't mean more money. There's a lot of factors in value, and you got to know your stuff when you're buying this stuff.